Good evening, everybody. I'm John OLoughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives, and it's Thursday night, which is TNT, the explosive trio, Thursday night trio with George Webb and Professor Hamamoto. Gentlemen, thanks for being with me again tonight, and welcome. How are you?
Great, John.
Great, John. Thank you for having me in. How are you doing, George? My compliments to the great show today.
Thank you, Doctor, and follow all your stuff too. So it's really very interesting times right now.
It is, and so much is coming out all just all over the place. We've all been doing research into different angles of this incredibly complex story or problem, or as George calls it, the biggest event in the history of the world. I guess is not unfair to say that, considering all the damage done already and the predictable damage that's just unavoidable. But we need to find a way out of it. And I've been concentrating a lot this week on the book of Klaus Schwab and Thierry Malloret called COVID-19: The Great Reset. And as I said last night, this is a frightening text, a recipe for a technological nightmare along the lines of 1984, with even worse techniques of Big Brother than were thought of back then. I am more concerned about the descent of a technological culture upon us that will make us under their control than I am about getting sick right now. I see that no less than the World Economic Forum from the get-go has been associating COVID-19 with an opportunity to do just that, to impose this technological big brotherism upon the world. I don't know if the vaccines have anything to do with that. I don't want to try to sort that out, but somehow their ball is moving forward as long as we stay locked down and stay in fear and don't know who we can trust. The whole divide and conquer thing is certainly in my mind as well. So with that, let me start with Professor Hamamoto, if you don't mind, George. I know George has got probably the biggest bombshell today, and maybe that's not fair, but I'd like to hear Professor's thoughts about the COVID-19 and the connection to the Great Reset.
Yeah, like John, like yourself, I have been revisiting that book. I was just looking at it again today. And there's one, I've always been troubled by this term reset, and it's been repeated ad nauseum. And I read the book quite thoroughly, and it seems to be focused on society, the economy, and social institutions primarily. But I think the great absence in that Klaus Schwab co-authored book is the fact that the genetic code is being reset. You don't talk about the resets of economy, resets of society, but you do talk about resets of codes. And that's exactly what I think is going on here. And that complements some of the work I've been doing on Francis Crick, biographical work. He's credited with being one of the three people who shared the Nobel Prize for coming up with the DNA pattern here, along with the other eugenicist, John B. Watson. And they're usually paired up as the good cop, right, of Cold Spring Harbor, Watson, and then he's the bad cop, and then there's the good cop, which is Francis Crick. Now, what I'm learning is that they're both bad cops, and we have to talk about both of them as being part of this pre-paperclip totalitarian, this fascist, medical science fascist system. And the reason I say this is because in reading biographical information on Francis Crick, I see that his boss was none other than, I think he's a monarchist. Most of these people are monarchists. They're loyalists. And they have them in Japan too, are still heavily into emperor worship. The people that spawn your Harry Harris type people. And this is the international fascist entity. And the boss of Francis Crick, who was at the Salk Institute of Biological Studies, and that's another term that's trouble. It's not biological sciences. It's the Salk Institute of Biological Studies. And that tells me there's a social and political great reset agenda behind supposedly this pure science genetic research. Anyway, the head, and then I'll turn this over to George for his comment. The head of the Salk Institute for Biological Studies was this monarchist by the name of Friedrich de Hoffmann. And whenever you see a de or a von in that name there, it always raises a red flag to me. Anyway, de Hoffmann was a protege of Edward Teller at the Manhattan Program, and they were both involved. They were collaborators in taking the next step forward, which is the hydrogen bomb. But as I stated before, where the Salk Institute of Biological Studies comes in is, I think this is the turning point where they decided that they're not going to go for big booms. They're not going to go for kinetics. They're going to go to genetics. And the post-Manhattan Project resources and the whole conceptual understanding of how to attain world conquest moved from nuclear warfare model, which we've been looking at for years and years, and have all these organizations against nuclear power, nuclear energy, nuclear weapons. This is where the model changed from nuclear warfare to nucleus warfare, and that's where we are today. And the king of that is Sina Bavari, who, George, you went into really deep today. And I found out, because I'm interested in bloodlines, especially those of the Aryan sort, and Sina Bavari is Iranian/Hindu Indian, but his namesake is the father of modern medicine. He might even be of that Sina Ibn Sina bloodlines. He's known in the West as Avicenna. His dates are 980 to 1037. He's 11th century father of modern medicine/alchemy. And what triggered that, George, in my mind, is your disquisition on, guess what? John Milton. Paradise Lost and Paradise Found, because they were all steeped into it. They understood this whole tradition. And it all comes to a head in one Dr. Sina Bavari. And that's where that bedrock sense of entitlement comes from. That's the arrogance, the hubris, ultimately, as the Greeks called it. This is also going to be their downfall, this hubris. It's that sense of entitlement that the people from the House of Orange, Nassau, or various royal houses, right, Coburn, Saxe, Gotha, this is their sense of entitlement over world domination. And that's why I think this cultural forensics, this background, is so important, because we do have to attack them on a metaphysical level, as in addition to the forensics BlackBerry level. George, my mellow is on you, Mr. George.
Well, we talked a little bit before the show, and we end up on our channel kind of taking on the sorry guys, but sometimes let me turn off one of these devices.
I think Malone is at work here.
Well, I think George is going to turn one device off and hope to get enough bandwidth.
I think this has become
sorry,
Dr. Malone's favorite channel.
Yeah. Well, okay, I'll try this. So I think, when you take on someone's, heroes and so forth, it's always dangerous, and it's always going to cause division in your group, not theirs, until the, evidence kind of flows out and gets to folks. I think this whole Sina Bavari thing, Mark Kulak and I have been, pounding on that for a year and a half. This Iranian guy who is at Fort Detrick during the anthrax, he's the #1 subject matter expert, and he's the #1 guy going against Bruce Ivins, who gets pinned for the anthrax 911. And then he's completely central to the COVID or coronavirus 911. And how can one man be so central to the two most polemic events of the third millennium? And he couldn't be, unless what you had said, Doctor, is true, that he is a part of some kind of culture where they think that this is their God-given birthright. And this Aryan thing is the thing I've seen the most with Peter Strzok and Sina Bavari and others. I'm not putting Malone in that camp, but there is this sort of master race. Let's Monsanto the world. Let's get rid of all the wild type corn. Let's get rid of all the wild type soybeans and all the other things. And John did a great book with this, with William Engdahl, Seeds of Destruction. It's the same thing in these guys' minds for the human race. You have the flavor savor tomato out there at Cal, at Davis. You know what we're talking about. Once that monoculture concept takes root in plants, well, then you go to animals. And the coronavirus was first applied there to create their monoculture around their approved animals, and every other animal dies. That's the idea. So for a master race or a master strain of their animals, the last logical step is for the human race. Again, I don't put the Malones in that camp. The Malones seem to be the cogs in the wheel that enable it to happen, working for the Gates vaccine initiatives, or working for DTRA to accomplish this many times with many different military vaccines and a lot of things we've been talking about. So I think there's two things going on here. One is the thing that you're saying, it's culture plus science bent to our purposes. And then the other one is there's the useful cogs, which I'd put Malone in that camp.
And as you mentioned before, Malone comes out of the Salk Institute of Biological Studies, and that is Friedrich de Hoffmann. I wonder if they knew each other. There was some overlap there so far as career goes. And I wonder if he hung out with Franny Crick, one of the Cambridge boys.
Well, those guys over at Cold Spring Harbor, you're spot on with their psychology of, we're not mastering the genome just to get our, curriculum vitae juiced up. We're doing this for a good reason. We're going to find the Achilles heels in the races and strains of people that we don't want. The Human Virome Project that Mark Kulak talks about, I believe, is just an extension of that. Is the virus is the attack vector for those weak Achilles heels in the strains that we don't want. And even if the Malones of the world, the useful cogs, don't realize it, there are the Klaus Schwabs of the world who will put these things to their effect as soon as they know these exploits exist. Just like there's Dmitry Alperovich's who will will write viruses just so they can sell antivirus software. It's not a big group. It's a small group that think that way, but there are these Nazi types, these Aryan types. Peter Strzok is certainly right there front and center, and Sina Bavari is sitting next to him in class. We talked about this kind of culture of the Borman Brotherhood that seemed to take root in Iran, in Isfahan, and that's where I think it comes from.
And of course, that ethos follows through the Knights of Malta and all these at a lower level fraternal organizations. But John, you put together Klaus Schwab with one Heinz Kissinger in your, I think it was a talk of yesterday or the day before.
Yes, indeed.
Schwab and Kissinger. Is he one of Kissinger's catamites?
Here's what I'd like to add to the discussion about that. Here's to me, I think is a big answer to a lot of what we've been trying to figure out. I wanted to talk about the British Order of the Garter, because the British Order of the Garter is where the juncture of the monarchists that you've been talking, there's a good word for it, in which Sean Ross calls the vertical order. the monarchist, the king runs everything, right? And the Pope is like that, versus the horizontal order, which is the basically the Knights, the Templars, the Knights Templar, and the nobility that's not the first sons, because the first sons always inherit, they become the vertical rulers. And what happened, and this is, George knows this, we started out 4 years ago talking about the Magna Carta, and this is what brings them together. Is you look at that seal, that the seal of Great Britain, and on the one hand it says it has the lion on this side, which represents the monarchs, the old order. And the new world order is the oligarchs, the horizontal ones, and they're represented by the unicorn, the white horse on the other side. And this is another esoteric reference to the pale white horse, right? And that horse has the unicorn, it's a unicorn, so it has a phallic symbol sticking out of his head. And the important thing is that the horse is chained. So you look at it and you say, what's up? Why is the horse chained? Well, the horse is chained to the monarchy. And this is what you just said, that these people are the servants, but they're serving because they believe that they're marching toward a better life, a better humanity, a new world order. These are the new world order folks. The old world order folks and the new world order folks made a deal that they're going to work together. And that's what the Order of the Garter represents. So when you have now, think of it like this. There's 3 players at the table. It's a cutthroat cribbage game, or whatever your worst card game for 3 people is. And think about how vicious those card games can get, right? And there's the monarchy. And then there's the secret societies, the Templars, the Freemasons, all of them. They're all the same, basically the same pool of non-first sons that had to make it on their own, so they stuck together and made these brotherhoods and secret societies. Right? There's that the lion on the left and the unicorn on the right. So, and you can see that there's a chain coming off of the unicorn's neck. Well, this is the eternal deal, and the motto under it says "Honi soit qui mal y pense," which means it's old French, and they translate it as meaning basically shame on anybody that thinks this is evil. So we made this deal, and if you don't like it, shame on you. Well, what about the third person at the table? That's the rest of us. This is the common people, right? And this is what's going on. Is those two, although they're united, it's like the CIA and the mafia working together, but at some point, the mafia is going to out blackmail the CIA, or the CIA is going to technologically control the mafia. One of them is going to come out on top. But that's what I think is going on right now when we talk about the Yankee and cowboy war, that the book I've been reading, that inside this thing that we call the deep state is still the tension between those two sides of this supposed bargain. And they're using us as pawns and using us as serfs and expendables, just like wars always do. And they both sides would like to reduce the population, but there's differences between them, and that is starting to come to surface. And I'm excited that I can possibly help uncover some of the differences that you speak about. These things, not in terms of they're all working together against the common people, but that the common people are still aware, still in the game. We can possibly do this if we can psych out what those the other two guys at the table are doing. If we can psych them out and figure out, who we don't want to give this card to, but who, if we give this card to, maybe could help us beat that other guy.
Absolutely. George?
Well, I think of John and me standing over there at Fort Washington and talking about Reinhard Gehlen. And the Hunt Agreement. And if you look at Reinhard Gillen, he was a Knight of Malta, but he wasn't, I don't think, a Knight of Malta because he liked stinky robes. He was a practical man who said, if I don't have this old guard like John's referring to on my side, I'm not going to go to power. Himmler was the same way as a Knight of Malta. He was a pragmatist. Hitler was more of an ideologue, but Hitler was an ideologue around purity and just, racism. But Hitler also appealed to the monarchy with Frederick the Great. His big hero was Frederick the Great, who talked about a sort of, culturing the little kids, sort of a Hitler or Kissinger kindergarten type thing. All the Kissinger kindergarten need to be raised up around me, and then we'll generate the next batch of leaders and rulers. So I agree with John here always on this subject, because you see this over and over again. The Bilderbergers will nod their direction toward the David Petraeuses and so forth. They're in two different camps, Kissinger being a pragmatist as well. They're in two different camps, but it is this uneasy, unholy tension. But it is what determines world events, unfortunately. We don't get to choose the fact that we have this history. We just either learn it or we are a victim of it.
Well, that is the Iron Cross, right? As John laid it out, it's vertical and horizontal. You put them together, and that is that cross symbolism. It has nothing to do with Christianity. It has to do with that relationship. So I would think on a strategic level, if we could somehow fracture or fragment, this has been my thought all along, if we could somehow find the fissures within these organizations and then put our little wedge in there and hammer it in there, then the edifice itself might crumble. At least part of it would be. So that, and I'm saying this because that's why it's so important, George, that you went in on someone like Malone, even though he's probably a lower level hod carrier for the big idea boys. That shatters their confidence. It takes away a good part of their game, which is John alluded to, which is mostly psych out. It's a psych game, right? We're invulnerable. We have the 8-pointed cross. We have these swords. We have the cool Hugo Boss uniforms and the jack boots, and you're nothing. And now we have all the medical science arrayed against you, right? So somehow we've got to find a way to get our heads back in the game, and the way to do it is through this type of research, right? I call it cultural forensics, but or metaphysical research. But you have to look at the bloodlines, you have to look at the who's, and from there you can suss out the larger structure, and from there you can find the fissures, the cracks, and then you work the cracks, you work the seams in an offense or in a defense. You always work the seams. And I think that's going to be the master strategy here if we're going to prevail.
Yeah, if you start out with the theorem, Task Force had the theorem. This is a virus vaccine game out of Fort Belvoir, run by DTRA, run by DLA, Defense Logistics Agency, run inside that by a guy named Lados and a guy named Roger Krona, okay, a good friend of the protege of Bissell, right, who had the Corona satellite. It's the journalist's job to go around and kind of see if it's true or not, and run around and, jiggle all the doors and go to Fort Detrick and see what, how close is it to the Fort, Frederick Airport, and go to Fort Belvoir so many times you can't count, and, interview the people coming and going from the Fort Belvoir Community Hospital. And when you see the blood going out, and you have whistleblowers telling you that the blood's going out on the planes, and you see the people involved being shipping the blood to places in Afghanistan and Iraq, and I mean, it just accumulates. And I think that it's a combination of those two things. It's the whistleblower who gives you the seed and says, "Hey, the Wands have a cage code. It's a virus vaccine game. It's not just depleted uranium ammunition. It's the food and drug, the cage codes in the food and drug. And that includes medicines being sent out, things under refrigeration." And that was the huge, that was out at Mount Vernon where I got that lead 4 years ago. And if you I've always said, if you could pull the curtain back on the smoke and mirror machine of the wizard, even little Toto can do it. And that's been my strategy from day one. And Bannon is the wizard. He's the Mr. Smoke and Mirrors machine of all time. And as soon as I saw him involved with Malone, both Mark Kulak and I just took we just dove right in there. And it's just a treasure trove every day of finding his deep state DTRA vaccines that he's done. And it's just every hour something comes up. So it's been that strategy you outlined right there, Doctor, I think is a winning strategy.
Now, George, what if you were to have in your hands the playbook of your opponent? Let's say you were on a Division I football team and someone left the playbook on the table at the restaurant. And of course, you can get kicked off the team or a huge fine if you're a pro, if that ever happens to you. What if you were to have that playbook? Would it make your job easier in connecting all these disparate people and their different activities? I mean, could you reverse engineer what they're doing from the basic? Okay, well, I have some good news. I have some good news for you. Check your email box, and also Aaron Adler and the great Andy Dabala. I sent you not one but 2 volumes of a series called. It has all the information. It's the whole playbook. It's called Defense Against Biological Attacks, Volume 1, and then there's a Volume 2, published by Springer Verlag. And guess who one of the editors, the co-editor is?
Malone.
Yeah, it's on your phone. But
Yep.
the co-editor for these 2 volumes is one Jens H. Kuhn.
Oh, Jens Kuhn. I saw the email you sent me. Jens Kuhn. That's right.
Okay. So there it is. That's the playbook. And then, I mean, it has all the science, all the empirical science there. But then the rollout part that we're seeing here, there's a gap between the theory and the execution here. So if you look at it, and I'm just from me doing, there it is right there. Just doing sort of a slight overview from a layperson's perspective, you can kind of infer what the next attack is going to be. Right? They're going to do like an end run, left side, or they're going to go long, or whatever it is, or 2 yards in a cloud of dust. But these articles here, if you look at them, and if you use the theoretical grid that UN Task Force put out there, and that's the important part. The only reason that people are able to put together all these disparate facts and not just have them languish as separated data points is that, George, you brought to the party an overarching theoretical perspective that links it all together. And that to me is your most profound, in addition to the empirical work you're doing, but that's been your most profound contribution to this effort. And the revelations of today couldn't be more timely, because we are really in extremis, as they say. I mean, to put it lightly, we're in severe jeopardy. So I think that's just that's ordained. I mean, that timing of it, and that gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah, I saw it. I didn't get a chance to go through it, but I definitely think you're right here that we study the playbook of the CIA going all the way back to McDuff, and that FBI versus CIA and the modus operandi, and then these kind of documents are fantastic. And if any JSOC guys out there have a thumb drive from Task Force, please get a hold of me. the Leidos thumb drive. Please get a hold of me.
Well, that's the thing about George, about McDuff is as you've done such a great job of putting his character into your work. The idea is that McDuffs are everywhere, and this is an iconic idea that there's still people out there, and this is an example. They are going to do the right thing no matter what. And when they swear an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, that's what they're going to do. And it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. It doesn't matter if your grandmother was the Queen of England, or whether you are the Grand Master of the Knights Templar of the greatest commandery that ever existed, or if you are perhaps of whatever religious faith or anything. None of that matters. You took an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. And this is where I think we have the basic litmus test of everybody just has to look at their conscience and say, now, who am I really? Am I somebody that is just going to take a career that is going to enhance the ability of this combination of the ruling classes, the monarchical and the oligarchical, that are working together to control and turn the rest of us back into slaves? Am I going to just accept that? Or am I going to look it square in the face and say, no, I'm not going to accept that. I am going to not accept that. And then when you realize that you're not alone, then that's where the power is going to come. Because when we network, as we've been doing, George, for 4 years now, and met thousands of wonderful, wonderful people, the first thing you realize is that everybody wants to be that person. How do you get out of your particular, everybody's gotten entrapped in some way, whether it's a student loan or a job or something, but nevertheless, you still got that conscience inside you that wants to do that right thing and to support, the good side of this country and bring back, whether it was ever great or not. I'm not going to try to argue that, but we do have a great operations manual called the Constitution. We do have a great declaration of our rights, and a Declaration of Independence is part of our founding documents. So let's get back to pursuing happiness and trying to preserve, protect, and defend. So this is what I'm saying, is that we recognize that we can drive these wedges. We can see how we can weaken this cabal that's working against the common people, but we have to recognize that everybody inside of them has got that desire to leave this country better than we found it, and to leave when we go with an idea that we did our best and our country is going to survive and thrive and our grandkids are going to be okay. And that's where it really comes down to right now, is are we going to stand up, or are we going to just see it all fall away?
Doctor, I'll let you go. I'll follow up.
Well, absolutely. And the good part about it is that you don't have to be an expert in any one area. The change that John O'Loughlin is describing so eloquently can come from any number of quarters. And let me give a pitch for the great state of Ohio, where I was privileged to live for 1 year, going to your father's alma mater, Bowling Green State University, also known as the Black Swamp, by the way. But one of the prides of Akron, Ohio, right? One of the great industrial cities that makes stuff. They produce, they manufacture. By the way, John, Carl Oglesby, you've been doing those great readings. He's from Akron, Ohio, and he comes from one of those dispossessed manufacturing families. And by the way, he was also involved with SDS, Students for Democratic Society. So let's all pull together on this. Doesn't matter if you're left or right, or Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump. We're all interested in the same goal of getting the truth out. That's Carl Oglesby, and I have a great respect for him. And those readings you've been doing have been wonderful. But let me give a pitch for one of besides Oglesby, but let's give a pitch for Devo that come out of Akron, Ohio. I think their sensibility was shaped by their working class, manufacturing, deindustrializing families, right? Their family history. Mark Mothersbaugh and Jerry Casale, they both came out of Akron. And then they went to Kent State. And Jerry Casale had two of his friends murdered there by our U.S. National Guard, right there at Kent State. And this guy is also from Ohio. He's a graphic novelist by the name of Durf Backdurf. That's his real name. It's not a nom de plume, but he writes these great, incredible graphic novels. So I'm telling you that whatever your skill set is, you can contribute to this renewal of the American Republic, especially people in the arts. And I know, George, that you're emphasizing mathematics and medical and training, right? That type of work. But I also think that the people who are in the arts, in the humanities, are really important to this revival. These are the people who are going to be writing the literature, the video games, and creating new creative projects for us that will hopefully supplant the hegemony of the Silicon Valley, including Netflix, that particular group. So I'd like to see young people get involved in video games, but writing them that are pro-human, and writing graphic novels that memorialize our tortured history, where there's a great deal of sacrifice that we've seen. There was four people murdered and any number of people injured, and this process is only intensified with a different type of assassination technique. And this time, it's not just people on a college campus that are targeted. It's the entire country, the United States, and even I'd go so far as to say the entire world is now under the target. They don't need bullets. They don't need kinetics. They need genetics. That's the great reset, the genetic reset, the DNA reset, the reset of the genetic code. That's what Klaus Schwab does not tell us.
Yeah, I agree with you on the humanities side. I think storytelling is hugely important. And Ronald Reagan used to say, there's people who think America's run out of heroes, and that's just because you don't know where to look. And John came to me in May of 2017. And he said, "Here's the story of American hero, and you want to publicize it?" And then I ended up writing about it. And I might have done a kind of a cobbler's job with.
No, you did a fabulous job, George. Absolutely.
I'm no Dr. Hamamoto with servitors. Servitors is sort of like something that you would carry on a pilgrimage. Playbook of the deep state. Dr. Hamamoto's book, Servitors of Empire. But I tried to cobble together that story as best I could and as true as I could. And it is the story of a guy who sees the Erich Traubs from the Nazi, death potion program going into Fort Detrick. The Unit 731s with the Ishis going into Fort Detrick, this kind of witch's cauldron that the new rap song in China talks about. Here down at the CDC in Atlanta, I was there a couple of days ago, and it's the same thing down there. You're seeing these kind of bioweapons guys from Nazis going in, and that's where McDuff starts his career. And later on, after Kennedy's dead and a lot of the McDuff cohorts are dead, and maybe McDuff is one of the first ones to go in the Bissell Health Alteration Committee line because he's the strongest. He's also working against these people that are trying to broker bioweapons to Russia and trying to disturb that, with this Novichok. So it is a great American story. I'm sorry I don't have a book to sell anymore because Amazon wiped them all out. But John's written a book about his dad, which is so much more complete and documented. And I encourage everybody, to get that on Amazon. And I will republish those three books as a set, along with another treatment of about 100 pages on top of it. But I agree with you on the humanities. I probably think my contribution isn't in the sciences. If I ever did one thing, it was telling McDuff's story that everybody could be a McDuff. And so, like you said, you might think that you could contribute on the science side, but your real contributions end up being someplace else.
It's wherever you are. That's your contribution. I had a great guest, a live guest on my show earlier today, and she's a an advocate of just sort of colorblind, admissions in college, right? We're fighting this critical race theory battle right now, especially in California. And she does it. She's an immigrant from China. She's been here maybe, I guess, half of her adult life now. And, she comes from the People's Republic of China. She should have been socialized into the whole post-Maoist regime. Once she got here, however, and got into graduate education, master's, and then a PhD at the University of Miami, she said, I'm going to be an American. This is the great story. This is not a fable. This is real. People live it. They're doing this every day. And, English is a second language, and man, she can just break it down on multiple levels. So please watch that. It's one of the best interviews I've done, I think, so far, if you have the time, ladies and gentlemen. And while I'm on the topic of ladies and gentlemen, I think what John and George and myself, what we share is that we have such a quality audience, right? We have such a quality group of people in the live stream and who watch these videos. And they are this group here, that we're talking about, this quality audience, it far surpasses anything that Donkey O'Sullivan can muster them in CNN. All their millions of people who they just have the TV on, so CNN is just kind of like background noise. But the quality audience that comes to see George Webb, in the Neighborhood News Group, and John OLoughlin, McDuff Lives, they are the doers, and these are the people who are making a difference now. And we got to see it again once more. We got to see another giant step forward this morning, live. In real time. That's journalism. And George, since we're complimenting each other, I will reiterate, you're modest, but John's here this time. I said this last week, but you are the John Hersey of our age. He's the guy that made the American and the world public finally see what Hiroshima and Nagasaki was really about, because it was James Conant, who John has done many readings about, Conant out of Johns Hopkins and then Harvard, right? And the guy who's the mastermind of a lot of chemical warfare out of World War I. See how it all comes together? He was one of the big guys that were trying to suppress Hersey. And they really dug in on these old school journalists and editors, like from the New Yorker. It was published as a series first as New Yorker. His name's William Shawn. And he was there for decades. He wasn't pushed out until 1987 when the whole Condé Nast took over of all our. This is part of the reason why we have such terrible journalism, because British intelligence took it over via Condé Nast, and this is where you get your fashion mavens coming in and these Anglo-American type journalists supposedly subverting our whole publishing system from within. So George, you're there, and quantitatively as well, and it's proven by the fact that the petition on .com, whatever it is, they had to cap it at 25 million.
Yeah.
Just imagine if they let it go on. And he sold hundreds of thousands of copies of Hiroshima within like 2 weeks. This is Penguin Books in England, and it went into it's never been out of print since that time. And I would argue that the story that you're on and your collaborators and all the people that have supplied you with information and insight, including the great task force, you're on this level for sure. And I tip my hat to you.
Well, I think the whole idea is a simple idea, which is what's happening is a recapitulation of a viruses and vaccines that were anticipated on the battlefield and tested on the battlefield. And now they've just been attenuated and turned down and used in a more low intensity fashion on populations. That's the very simple basic idea. And that there was a universal vaccine for the top guys at NATO when they did the spraying in Libya and Syria, Sudan, Yemen, all across Africa, etc. And now the Uyghur channel going out to Western China all the way to Rotterdam for the Belt and Road, where all the 400 prison camps are. So all this idea that, hey, the same thing that happened with the Nazis, with sort of the labor camps, which were all about drug manufacturing and missile manufacturing, the platform and the payload, have happened in just different forms inside our institutions, Fort Detrick, Fort Belvoir, etc. And then the testing has happened on our U.S. soldiers, both in the field and back here at home. Just that idea is so simple, but proving it is the hard part, right? So, but that is a world shattering or world levering, it's not shattering as much as it changes the historiography. That does change your perspective. I know the book you're talking about, and most Americans were completely shocked at the ramifications of the bombs, and that changed public opinion from 95% in favor of dropping the second bomb, for instance, on Nagasaki, which was just a show of strength for a second type of bomb to the Russians, right? And then the first one was completely, a civilian target. The only thing you could even say was a military target was the Bank of Tokyo that had a branch there. We all have to, if you think about it like I want to do something great, it's never going to happen. If you think about it like I have to do something that's really true and really important, and if everyone knew this would really be a world-changing thing, then I think you get it done. And like you said, every person, all my intelligence, 95% of it is open source, people sending me things they found, compound searches. So much of it is open source.
Mm-hmm. And your particular genius, George Webb, is the ability to synthesize it. Number one, holding it all there, all the contradictions as well as the congruences in your mind at once, but synthesizing it, because I think you not finally, but you really understand the nature of the dark side of American empire. We are socialized to look at only the triumphs, the good part. And I think for me, the people that I've met, the most difficult part for them is to come to that understanding that, yes, there's something called evil, with a capital E, that's always been with humankind and always will be here. And there have been multiple expressions of that evil within us, in addition to our divine nature, our better angels, right? We have that other part. And Americans in particular, as a nationality, because, I've lived in other countries, have a difficult time. And I think they're finally there's been a huge awakening in that fashion, are finally beginning to understand that, yeah, we do have, it's not just something that happened in 1945. It's happening in 2020, 2021, but on a much more massive level than we've ever seen. This is the big one, ladies and gentlemen.
And may I just jump in there, because this is where I would say to you, Professor, Ani soit qui mal y pense. Shame on you for calling it evil. You just called it evil, and that's exactly what we have to do. That they will quash you for doing that. This is what censorship is all about. We will censor you if you try to point out that we are doing evil. This is the key to all secret societies. The ends are justify the means. We're gonna make this wonderful, wonderful life. Says Klaus Schwab. It's going to be beautiful. We're going to be all connected. We'll all have this kind of magical connection with our brains. Can you think how wonderful it would be to have 1 billion people all working on the same problems? How could we get that lithium from the asteroid up there, and we'll all sort it out together, and all of these things will be a great human project that we'll work on together. All of this Pollyanna BS is to cover up the fact that we're going to be enslaved by this thing. As David Icke points out, if you can learn from it, they can also send it the other way and tell you what to do. You can be instructed by this stuff too. I don't want it. I don't want it in me. And that's one of the concerns I have right now, specifically right now, when we start talking about graphene and things that they want to. It's just some of them want to get in there. When you mentioned genomes, and I've been looking a bit into this organization of it's like an international genome project that's based in Trieste, which is right on the border of Italy and Slovenia. And that organization is going to bear some scrutiny. I recommend folks to take a look at that, because where these guys are going, you know, it could be, you know, that this whole thing is a vector to help them get that magic sauce into us, that they can do those connections. And more than that, I can't. I'm only speculating. George is smiling. What do you think?
Well, I'm thinking about my trip to Trieste, and I was seeing this huge statue of Julius Caesar, and like the Roman order, like you're talking about, and by any means possible, just over the border now in Slovakia. So, I got followed by a Slovakian soldier for a ways. But anyway, going back to what you said about evil and recognizing evil, I'm a mentee for certain of McDuff, this McDuff right here, this way, because I didn't know where Fort Hunt was. I didn't know who Reinhard Gehlen was. I didn't have any of this background of Fort Belvoir being the kind of the successor of these thoughts from Fort Hunt's ashes. I didn't know anything about that. John and his book train and all that book train that you see behind him, it kind of just went, I'm sorry, I'm going to do this backwards, but it kind of went from his bookshelf into my brain. and that's what allowed me. I mean, having a father that's been murdered by the deep state and who is Bissell and all this really opened my eyes. I used to watch CNN. It used to be how I got my news. I used to think that Wolf Blitzer was great. You know, I used to think CNN was the greatest network ever. That's all I would listen to. It was my favorite network not that long ago. But it's studying all those books on that book train. And Jumping Mouse has done such a good job of animating it. And John, you've done such a good job of articulating it and giving it voice. That is incredible. And just taking the work and take it off the shelf, blow the dust off, and these authors come to life. Look at the Doug Valentine interviews that John's done, and Ed Haslam down in New Orleans, Florida. It's just been an incredible journey. This whole 4 years, it's like a PhD education in about 6 different subjects. So it's been great.
Challenging, man. You challenge me to rise up to another level, because I just love it. I mean, you and I don't think we've ever changed from the first time we met. When I just, if I'm around you, if there's something buzzes, I'm just like more alert and looking. The tentacles or the synapses are looking out for connections, and it's exciting. Same with you, Professor. We haven't been physically together. I tried to get you out to the first McDuff charrette, but then they hit us with the COVID, and you weren't able to travel. And then I haven't been able to get out to California, but we will make it one day.
We will. Yeah, absolutely. It's wonderful how it comes together, and that in itself, the whole process that both of you have so well described, is in itself a form of victory. It's an ongoing processual victory, and hopefully we're going to get out of this because of this. But in the meantime, I don't mind personally, and I watched the show live, and some people were kind of distressed by it, seeing all the conflict going on in the live chat a couple of days ago about over Dr. Malone and all that. I think that's good. We need to scrimmage hard against each other. We need to really pound each other and make us defend our statements and be held accountable to it. And it only makes us better. So I encourage with my own audience and whoever else. That's just me. I don't mind conflict. I think conflict is good. Tension is good. We need it. That's how we become better.
I wanted to ask you, Doctor, because I've been just going and going about Collegiate Gothic and just how that project's going on. I've heard inklings and caught you bits in here and there.
Oh yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned it. I have a side project of the side project, which is Collegiate Gothic. Francis Crick is going to be one of those. But I'm glad you asked because I was going to mention this. I've been doing some readings of a la John O'Loughlin, just introductions or abstracts from papers that I think are useful. And what I found out is that people were coming back to me and they're saying, "Wow, you should do this as a gig." It's ASMR, and ASMR is the biggest thing on YouTube. It's big in Japan, it's big in South Korea and China, and it's exploding here. And what it is, and so you can combine ASMR, and this is like that tingly feeling you get from oral sex, AURAL. You know, it's sort of the sound sensation, sonic, which are healing, and it's become a thing. And I think if you combine ASMR as part of a pedagogy, right, a learning technique, I think you have something there. So I'll be doing these readings with my ASMR voice. I've got the mics, I've got the EQ. John knows about recording. I'm processing my voice in a way that will allow me to do this on these little 10, 15-minute bits. And then later on, I will be branching out into the music area. This pedal here will allow you to do sonically what you see visually in the barber pole. You know, the Coriolanus effect, the barber pole where it goes around and round and round. This, by the way, is made in Portland, Oregon. So that's going to be, you know, part of my my side projects. Collegiate Gothic, where I'm going to critique the university system where all this stuff comes out through the lens of true crime. All the scientists, engineers, and students that are murdered. Like, you know, you were up at Cornell not long ago. There has a huge suicide problem in those gorges. I bet if you checked out the background of the students, many of them probably saw something they shouldn't have, right? And so that's how I'm going to do it obliquely, instead of just challenging the institution itself. Oh, your curriculum's bad and you're doing all this critical race theory. No, I'm going to just talk about the criminality of the institution, and then people are going to take that away and either build their own institutions or reform the existing ones. So anyway, that's Collegiate Gothic. Seeping out of the soil of our Gothic history. Edgar Allan Poe, right?
Well, that certainly happens at the veterinary college over there at Cornell. all the choice winners they seem to produce over there. I was kind of impressed with their waterfalls, but you're right, there is sort of a precipice there. I did notice too that it is a different kind of Ivy League. It is sort of this bioweapons fast track, if you will. And if you don't get on that Fauci bioweapons fast track, you're probably not going to be a big player. I can't remember where Redfield went to medical school, if he did, but I thought it might have been Cornell, and Burks I thought was a Cornell type. And the Ivy Leaguers tend to, you know, stick together, whatever their school is. But this, if they've spent some time at Cornell in the biology, you can almost predict what's going to come out. And that's going to be this Faucian cog that's going to just do what the deep state wants in the, like you said, as we move from nuclear to nucleus, those are the servitors they're looking for.
Mm-hmm. So I am doing a Collegiate Gothic episode on the student suicides of the Cornell University Gorge. By the way, they've had to put nets under those bridges, those walkways. The problem is so serious. And this also serves as a cautionary warning to undergraduates or graduate students who think they're going to make a name for themselves by becoming the next Dr. Anthony Fauci. You're on a death trip right there. You know, if you're a student listening here, you're on a death trip. So why don't you get into the health economy? Why don't you look at health and nutrition? I know Andy DeBall is working out and eating well, or other, you know, quote unquote alternative forms of health, such as sound frequencies or bio farming. You know, I think, John, you were talking about Rudolf Steiner, right? He was one of the pioneers of bioenergetics so far as farming is concerned. All that information is available to us, and I'm glad that we can have discussions about this in different formats.
Well, let me put in one plug for, in case you guys haven't checked into the man who's been called the German Dr. Fauci. His name is Dr. Christian Drosten, Drosten. He's the German Dr. Fauci, and I did a Twitter thread on him today, and I recommend you guys check into him, because as Mark has been working on the what is it, Snohomish County man, that seems to be a very, very sketchy connection. Once again, I think we have a very sketchy history of how did the PCR test become adopted so quickly as a diagnostic tool in diagnosing COVID-19. And the way that was rushed through is a story that everybody needs to study. So let me leave you with that from my end. The Gothic. I'm looking forward to your next is it your first episode of what is it called? Gothic? What is it, Professor?
Collegiate Gothic.
Collegiate Gothic. Okay,
Yeah.
that sounds like an interesting thing, and I know it will be. And George Webb, you've got your you said your what books do you have on offer now? I guess the way I want to put it. Excuse me, I think I'm getting a little punchy.
As we speak here, John, Andy DeBala is just printing the first copy of Bavari 911. It's the story of a man who's in the middle of the two most polemic events, maybe maybe false flag, maybe not, but the two most polemic events in the third millennium. So that's weighs in at 360 pages. They're getting heavier and heavier and thicker and thicker. But that you can find those on neighborhoodnewsstudio.com. We kept the price at $30, even though it's double the ink with all these graphics and maps and charts. But and then you have a 4-pack for my previous 4 books that you can buy for I think it's $100 on the site to catch up, and then collect all 5 and give them to your friends, and put them in the bathroom or the magazine rack or wherever you are. And because they're very graphic, as you mentioned, graphic novels, they're heavy on graphics, heavy on captioning, of light narrative, connective tissue, so that you can get a lot out of it, even if you don't, have time to read. So there it is. Thanks for the plug, John, on Bavari 911.
I'm going to buy that. Who did the cover, by the way? Who did the cover art?
Andy.
Andy.
Yeah.
All right, Andy does it again.
He has amazing talents. We appreciate. He did the cover art for my book too, and very nice. I love all of the stuff that he does. It's just so it's so nice to just run into somebody that has just hidden talent and say, oh, I need a cover for you. Just no problem. Here's your cover. And the first time I saw it, I said, that's it. I have no questions. This is exactly right.
I told Andy, I said, I need 2 toxic clouds, one for Krylova, one for Bogacheva, and I need one saying anthrax 911, and I need a corona 911. And he got the syringes in there. And I said, because his career bookends in the 20 years, these 2 big, huge false flags. And that's what came out of it. These smoke clouds, like he's dreaming up the next witch's cauldron from these 2 huge events. So he did a great job. It's a beautiful cover. Yeah.
All right, and definitely there's a great bonus attached to your purchase, and that is you get an autograph of George Webb himself. So that'll be a collector's item, and I encourage everyone to do it now, because now is the time that the studio needs your support. They've taken a lot of hits. The stream of income from all these different streams has been taken away. And so buying a book is not only a great way to learn, it's a great way to support Neighborhood News Studio. So with that, Professor Hamamoto, George Webb, everybody in the chat room, it's been a great pleasure for me. And I look forward to seeing you all again real soon. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night, John.